Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's web conference, Dynamics 365 FastTrack Tech Talk. Today's topic is driving user adoption. We are recording on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. If you do not consent to being part of a recorded session, please disconnect your browser at this time. Attendees may access the web conference recording at this same registration site within 24 hours. We encourage you to use the messages panel at any time to ask questions regarding content or to request support. To do so, just click on the messages button at the bottom of your screen, type your question into the white text box, and click send. Our presenters will be responding to your questions during the event. We also use this messages tab to post announcements to the audience, so please look there for some important information regarding this event. Our event production team strives to be a leader in delivering online content. Please help us reach this goal by providing feedback. At the end of the session, a survey URL will appear on the left side of your screen. Simply click on the survey URL, enter your email address, and select your responses. Thank you for your support. And thank you for your patience during this announcements. There will be a brief pause while I start the recording. Welcome to today's web conference, Dynamics 365 FastTrack Tech Talk. Today's topic is driving user adoption. Presenting today, we have Alok Singh, Senior FastTrack Program Manager with Microsoft, and Robert Renson, Senior FastTrack Program Manager with Microsoft. Alok, you now have the floor.
Thanks, Michelle. Everyone, thanks for joining this session. I think we're very excited to bring you the Adoption Tech Talk this year once again. We did one last year, and we had very good feedback and a lot of interest from our customers, and so we have decided to do this again in this calendar year. And please provide your feedback at the end of this session. And if you want us to add more content or whatever you feel about this tech talk, that's very important for us to improve this content overall. But thanks for joining this, and we'll get started now. Okay, so the core objectives for the tech talk today are really, and we call it a tech talk, though we're not going to discuss a lot of technical topics in this, but it's just that that's the name of the series. But our focus would be on adoption and what it really takes for your end users to use your system and be happy and satisfied when they're using your Dynamics 365 solution. So the core objectives for today's session are providing an overview of the adoption itself, and stressing on the importance and why that should be a part of your project plan, and why your program should focus on adoption really. We will go deep on the adoption guidance itself, and when we say adoption guidance, this is not really a course on change management and adoption, but the goal here is to bring you some of the learnings from our past experiences and what we have seen on some of the projects in the past. So we want to highlight some of the key adoption barriers, where things go wrong, and what you can do beforehand to avoid those issues and clear those barriers for your users to start using the system. That's going to be the primary focus. We'll also talk a little bit about the tooling and the solutions that are out there that will help you measure the adoption, and we can talk a little bit more about the approach that you can take for your specific solutions, and how you should be measuring adoption, and what is being used, what's not. And we'll also share some of the adoption resources that we have there that can help you with your training, with your accessibility needs. So yeah, we share those resources with you, and you'll also have we should have sufficient time in the end for you to ask any questions, or if you have any experiences that you want to share, feel free to do that. And yeah, so with that, I think we're very excited to get started with the tech talk. And again, the target audience that we have mentioned here are the project business manager and technical project managers, but I think we can certainly add to that list, because solution architects, developers, I think it's relevant to everyone who's building a system and who's involved in the project, because when we are thinking about adoption, it's about delivering a great user experience. And I think everybody on the team needs to be aware of what we are trying to do and how it's going to impact the end user. So from that perspective, you will certainly find this content valuable, irrespective of your role, and if you're involved in building business solutions for your end users. So with that, we'll just go into the usage and adoption overview. I just want to talk a little bit about the importance of adoption, how it was approached in the past, and why that's changing now a little bit. So usually the focus that we have seen are a lot of IT departments or the architects or developers. Our primary goal is to get the business requirements and implement them, as it was told by business. Deliver the technical solution. But many a times we assume that once you have built something and it's being deployed and made available, people are going to use it, and that's where the challenge comes, because there are millions of dollars that are spent in building a solution and deploying it, but if it doesn't meet the end user's requirements really, or even if the end users don't feel motivated or excited to use it, the program can be a failure, even though you have had a very, very successful technical implementation. So from that perspective, the end user adoption is really the key to achieving the business goals that you really started off with. So whatever your vision or your goal of implementing Dynamics 365 was, if you're not able to get the adoption right, there is no way that you'll be able to meet that goal, irrespective of all the code and all the technology that you've used in building your solution. So what it really takes for successful adoption is to really be aware as a first step that how important it is and what's the impact that it can have on your business and on your end users, right? So being aware of that and having a very clear approach towards it. What is the change management process that you have defined for your project? Is there a owner who's responsible for the adoption and change management, who's gonna look at what is the experience that the users currently have and how is it going to change after we deploy the new system? What is our awareness in terms of the barriers? How well do we understand our users? And many times these things can vary from one organization to another, depending on a lot of factors. So having a deeper understanding of how my users are going to perceive the system, what are their challenges, and does it really meet their requirements? Starting from there, and then based on that, having a clear adoption plan is extremely important. And I think that the important part is any system where you're trying to, build it, and you're obviously working through a set of, business KPIs or metrics that you want to improve. Maybe it's your sales performance or you reduce the time that your reps are spending on a customer call. So all of these things are specific KPIs, and you might have reports or systems in place to measure these KPIs, but there's no way that you can measure the improvement in sales velocity after deploying Dynamics if your users are not updating or not even creating opportunities in the system. So even to be able to get to know whether you're meeting your KPIs or not, it's important that the system gets first adopted and actively used by your end users. So that's really just stressing on the importance of adoption, and why this has to be a part of the project that gets the right amount of budget allocated to it and gets the right kind of resources and people who are responsible for it. So that's a little bit on the adoption overview, and again, it sounds like it's a one-time thing. Once I deploy the solution, we are gonna do the user training, and that's it. That should work. But in reality, if we see the adoption has to be an ongoing process. It's not a one-time activity. So you have a clear plan of the things that you want to do. Maybe it might be a user trainings or the sessions that you're having. Involving your user community during the project development stage, or giving your leaders time to communicate with your end users during your town halls, etc. So whatever your communication plan or adoption plan is, end of the day, you need to be aware of what specifically works within your organization, what doesn't, what are those adoption barriers, and align this plan with that. And once that is done, you execute your plan, you see how things go, and you have a clear way to measure. When I say measure, you should be able to, get a view of how many users are using the system, which are the departments or which are the locations that are actively using, which are not. So trying to measure the adoption and seeing the patterns there might give you a very good idea of where the adoption is going well and where it is not. There might be some processes that are implemented that might be more complex or very convoluted, so users are not using it. So you might see a drop in usage of those specific entities or those specific business processes. So it's important that you have a way to measure the adoption. We're going to talk about that a little bit and share the tools that we have. But for your own scenarios, it's always good to think about how you'll be measuring whether this process or this system is being used or not. And then finally, based on the learnings, we refine the approach and we go through the cycle once again. And why this is becoming more and more important is because in the world of SaaS applications and cloud, that even from a Dynamics 365 customer engagement perspective, we release 2 major updates for our product every year. And with these updates, our goal is to, improve the performance of the product, deliver new capabilities, and also improve user experience for your end users. And it's important that there will usually be some change management activities related to taking these updates. So if you're moving from version 8.2 to 9.2 or 9.1, you will still need to go through a set of changes, and the experience that your users will get at after the update is going to be different. And it's very important that we prepare for it, and it's well communicated to the users as well. So that's the reason we see that adoption is an ongoing process, and we should always monitor and have a communication channel open with the users to see what's going on and make constant improvements. So that's just stressing more on the importance of adoption and what should be our thinking and approach when we think about adoption of business applications. So moving ahead, I think this is the core area where we have tried to categorize and look at where do we see key adoption barriers, or where are the real challenges, and what do we hear from users as to why they are not using the system, or why they're not happy logging in and going through the processes and updating the records. So I think this and we want to cover the adoption guidance from these 5 perspectives. Really, it does have a technical perspective to it, but also from a business standpoint and also from an adoption enablement standpoint. What are the things that come into play that will actually decide end of the day whether your application will be used or will it be adopted by your end users or not. And again, like I mentioned, a lot of these learnings that we have had are from our projects and something that we have seen in the past. So it's important that as we discuss this, I'm pretty sure at the end of it, you'll have a fairly good understanding of what you need to go back and do on your projects, or if there are pieces of things a lot of things you might already be doing, but if there are things that you're missing out, I think this will certainly be helpful. So the 5 key areas that we are focusing on here are the business value. When we say business value, it's really around the definition of the business strategy or the key goals while you're implementing Dynamics 365. The corresponding success KPIs, how well they were defined, and what are the core business outcomes of the Dynamics 365 program. Again, looking at it very strategically from a business perspective, and we'll talk about why that's important and how this information actually translates into end user adoption and the story that you're going to tell to your end users. The next one is the data and functionality, and this is again one of the big areas which is the core solution. And when we're trying to build the solution, a lot of times we customize, we put in the right fields, and we do a major data migration from the older systems, maybe from more than one system many a times, and we bring it into this Dynamics database. And and what can go wrong there? What has been our experience there? We're going to look into a little bit of data and functionality perspective and how that can impact the adoption. And the third one is the usability aspect. So I think usability and a clear understanding of how your users actually use the system. What does a user base look like? Are your users, working from an office? Are they in the field, always traveling? Maybe in locations where the network connectivity is not always reliable. So all of those factors, and having a deeper understanding of how things are actually used on the ground is very important. And then trying to deliver an experience that matches as closely as possible to your user experience. Finally, we're going to talk about a little bit about the performance, and again, this is another area that can have an impact on adoption and how your users perceive the solution, because nobody likes a slow system, and if your forms are taking 10 seconds to load, users are not going to like it. So focusing on the performance and making sure that irrespective of where the user is, whatever their location is, you're still able to deliver a good and acceptable performance to them is extremely important. And finally, we are going to be talking a little bit about the adoption enablement itself, where what are the things that your change management strategy should have in place. There should be user training, the communication strategy, talking about the super user networks, and how to involve the user communities early on. A little bit of discussion around that. So I think these 5 key areas should cover most of it, whether it's from a solution perspective, from a user's expectation perspective, and also overall strategically how the business and IT should think about the solution. So just going deeper on the business value side of things, the first aspect in business value is really defining the strategy and business case, right? When you're in the process of buying Dynamics 365, or even before the start of the project, there are a clear set of business goals that you're working towards. You want to drive improvements maybe in one of your processes, and that definition has to be clear, and it has to be simple enough so that you're able to communicate this across to your users, that what is the business looking for and why are we going through this exercise, because that sets the importance, or the users perceive the system to be important for their organization, and why their leadership is stressing on the usage of the system, right? So that message of what is the improvement that we are trying to drive and why we are building this is extremely important. The other part is also to take into consideration some of the aspects related to the product roadmap, and why product roadmap is important is many a times the initial goal that you might have to build a system might be just a simple one, but it's also important to have define a roadmap or your broader vision that you might do as a part of phase 2, phase 3. So even if the solution that might be going live in a matter of 2 or 3 months might not deliver all of those capabilities, but this broader vision that you have and a roadmap that you have defined for yourself needs to be very clear and communicated to your user community. And that's a key important point when it comes to the business value. Have a clear change management strategy and have people who own this and who are responsible and answerable to the business from a change management perspective. The KPIs that you define for your success. Now, end of the day, after you've deployed Dynamics 3 months down the line, what are the KPIs that you're going to go measure to say that yes, this deployment was successful, or business has met the goal that they started with. Example of business KPIs might be you want to maybe improve your sales by X%, or the opportunity closure rate needs to be improved. The time to handle a case needs to be reduced. So all of these KPIs that can be specifically measured by running some reports are very important, and these are the KPIs that business is after from the Dynamics 365 implementation. That's their key expectation. So defining that and communicating that is key. The other aspect is the executive sponsorship and business alignment. And the reason why we talk about business alignment here is in a lot of scenarios, what we see is, initially the business is deeply involved in the program. The product is bought, the initial requirement workshops, and all that goes good. But once the requirements are finalized, it's kind of passed on to the IT department to do the execution. So, IT might be working with some additional partners and, external vendors to deliver the solution. But then what happens is, during that period, the business might be getting more disconnected, and they're not so involved in the process. And what we have seen is, if the requirements are finalized by business and just passed on to the IT without a deeper involvement of the business, things usually in these projects, the biggest challenge is that the focus will be only on meeting the business requirements. IT is delivering that, and the end user perspective is missing. And sometimes the why, in terms of why we are doing this, might be lost. So it's very important that business is a part of the program. They are deeply involved even during the implementation phase. Maybe they should be participating in your sprint reviews, or some of these sprint demos that you might have, so that they're getting a good picture of the solution that you're delivering. And if you have any early feedback, then you can get that early on. And I think the most important side is there has to be a representation from the user community, even during your implementation. So it's not just sufficient to have an architect and a project manager and a set of developers who are building it, but who is involved from an end user perspective? Are there specific people that you've identified within your community who can be a part of the implementation and provide you early feedback? They can look at some of your demos and validate the experience that you're delivering for them. So in the business, the IT and the representatives from the end user community need to really come together as a part of delivering any Dynamics or any business solution. Without which we see that just passing it on between the business, IT, and then just deploying it for the users to use it doesn't work very well. And looking at the user adoption goals, I think this is very important, and this ties into the initial point that we spoke about, which is related to defining your business strategy and KPIs. Because if you don't have your success KPIs and metrics clearly defined, we will not be able to map those into clear adoption goals for the end user groups. So if you have 2 or 3 different groups of users, and you want to tell them how frequently they should be maybe making these updates in the system, or how they should be using the system, what is expected out of them cannot be clearly defined if we don't know what our success KPIs are. So there has to be a clear exercise of understanding our success KPIs and mapping that into specific adoption goals that their maybe the sales manager or the operational managers can then go and say that this is what we are after, and this is what we should be doing, or you should be measured on from an end user perspective, so that they understand what are my adoption goals. Am I just supposed to go and update my opportunity once a month? Is that gonna let the business accurately measure their KPIs? Maybe not. So setting that expectation in terms of the adoption goals and what's expected of the users is extremely important. And also, it might be good to think of a way to provide them visibility into their progress as to how well they're meeting their adoption goals, or maybe a dashboard where they get that you have done X number of leads or X number of opportunities, which is giving them a good, which establishes kind of a good feedback system for them to know how well they're doing on the adoption goals that have been set for them. That's another thing that we should keep in mind. So that was around the business value piece, how the business IT should come together, and how should we look at business KPIs and then map those into adoption goals for our end users. So that's one big area from where you can run into a lot of adoption barriers if not done correctly. The next one is the data and functionality, and I think this is more to do from a solution perspective. The customizations that you're doing, the integrations that you're building, how how can they impact adoption, right? And I think the first one to really start off with would be the data. So the quality of data that you have in the system is one of the key factors that establishes trust between the end user and the system that they're using. Because if they think that the data is not reliable or if the data is missing from a system, they're never going to trust the system, which means the overall perception about the system is not going to be good, and they will not adopt the system. So it's extremely important that if you're migrating data from existing systems, moving them into a Dynamics 365 instance, it's very important to have a very clear data strategy, whether it is defining the age plan. Do users expect to look at activities that are 3 years old? We might think not, but there might be scenarios where they might need that. So it's very important to have a data age plan that's clearly defined and agreed with the users. So whatever they expect to see in the system should be there. We usually go through a lot of scrubbing and cleansing process, but we also need to make sure that the users are still able to see the data in the format that they had seen in a way that they're used to, and we don't lose that context, and they're not confused when they start looking at the same data in the new system. And I think the key exercise here is, once you do your initial runs, maybe on the sandbox instances or in UAT or trading environments, make sure that you have a validation exercise where the users can come in, they can provide you feedback, and they can look at all of the data migration, how well it was done, and tell you if this is the right approach or not. Just assuming that because you created a business, you created a map, mapping the field A from source system to mapping to field B in the destination, and just running that migration, assuming that everything will be fine, doesn't work. So make sure that you allocate time for this business data validation exercise involving users from different stakeholder groups, so that they can provide you early feedback and you can make these corrections. One of the biggest areas which we've seen can cause delays in projects and impact adoption. The next one would be the process and integrations. So it's very important to understand what are the different systems that a user typically works with, because you might be looking at one of your customer processes and implementing that within Dynamics, but if to go through that process, your user has to open maybe 5 different systems, copy in information from elsewhere, and put it into Dynamics before they can move to the next stage of their business process flow. We know that adoption is going to suffer. So it's very important to understand, do they have the data that they need to work with? And if not, can we do these integrations with the LOB systems? And again, doing the integrations are getting simpler. I can say there are a lot of no-code, low-code solutions out there that can help you simplify this integration to maybe sometimes bring in this data within Dynamics. But in many cases, it's not even necessary to bring in the data within Dynamics, but just to be able to surface them, maybe through a visual or a UI kind of integration where without having to open another system, log in there and look at that data, maybe this can be exposed within Dynamics through a web resource or different UI mashup capabilities that we have to just surface the data from a different system so that they can do their job. It's one of the key factors that will really guide their adoption and their comfort with using this new system. In fact, it can be a big value add for them to actually use Dynamics if you've done these integrations, so that they don't have to use the file systems like they used to before Dynamics, and now it's all in one place. So that can be a big win and a big motivation for them to actually start using. Next one I would like to talk about is reporting, and I think it's important to, and I get a lot of questions around reporting. A typical reporting strategy was, the business is going to give a set of requirements. These are the fields, these are the charts I require, and you build a report out, and the users can consume those reports, right, based on their security role and whatever they need to. But taking to the next level, it's also important that, Dynamics supports a security model where users can only access the data that they need to. And, if the security models are implemented correctly, the users have the freedom to go and build their own dashboards, their own views, because many a times there might be a field that's missing in the system view that was created, or even the sequence of the fields might not be appropriate from that user's perspective. So enabling them to be able to go and build their own reports and dashboards within Dynamics, so that they can get the insights and visualize the data the way they want, can really empower them in a big way. So think of that, and try to train your users and make them aware of the options that they have to really tailor the system to their own requirements. Even Power BI can support some of these, self-service analytics solutions. So you might be able to, get the Dynamics data set within Power BI, and they can just use a simple drag and drop mechanism there to visualize this data. So, so the key learning here is that you might be able to think of some of the reports that your users want, and you can deliver them, but enabling them to be able to do a lot of this on their own can be a really powerful experience for them. So that's something that the platform supports, and we recommend that you do that. The last one is the privacy and collaboration. Now, it's very important. One of the biggest aspects of establishing trust between a business application or a system and the user is they having a clear view of who can see what. If you're trying to build, let's say, a HR case management system, it's extremely important that your security requirements meet the expectations of the users. They need to have a clear understanding of, if I'm entering a case here, or if I'm entering some sensitive information, who is it who can see it? Can my colleague see it? Can my manager see it? Can the HR see it? So that has to be very clearly established, that what are the privacy requirements that your users have, and how the security model that you have meets those requirements. And that's, I think, extremely important when designing a system. And as while privacy is important, the other side of it is the system should also allow them to collaborate wherever required. If I'm a sales rep, I'm working on an opportunity, and I know that there was another opportunity, maybe in the similar organization or a similar opportunity, the system should allow me to collaborate with my peers and people within my organization to be able to do my job better. And looking at the productivity and the collaboration options that we have with Dynamics, and how some of those services can integrate with Dynamics is really important, so that this can be a big value add for your end users. And collaboration is challenging, and if this system can simplify that and surface them that you should be talking to XYZ, or you should be talking to this department or this person, that can be really powerful motivator for them to start using a system. So again, these are some these 3 or 4 factors that we think can really impact the adoption, and by doing this right, we will certainly eliminate a lot of barriers from a solution and functionality and data perspective. Moving on to the next one, this is usability. So again, I understand that with Dynamics we are working with a product that we are customizing, and we don't have all kinds of controls over maybe adding colors or all kinds of freedom to add the kind of navigation that we want to. But when I say navigation and providing that flexibility to end users, it's important to look at the experience and build a system in a process-centric manner, because typical thinking around creating tables, relational tables, and establishing relationships between these tables, and foreign keys, primary keys, etc. That might be a good way to actually store the data and define the relationships between data, but that might not be, again, the best way from an end user perspective to actually enter this and go through as a process. So it's important that you think when we're designing the system and these entities from also from a navigational perspective, and maybe you can use a business process flow that can tie in 4 different entities together and give that experience where users can seamlessly enter and record information from each of these entities without having to actually close and open a different entity form, because all they're doing is they're working through that process and not having to understand the complexity of how many entities were involved in building that process, what data is held in which entity. So it's extremely important to think about how the user is going to navigate through the system, and how are they going to enter this information step by step, rather than just thinking of how the data will be stored in different entities and what's the relationship that's required. We also have some features like learning paths, which provide more guided help and contextual guidance to the end users within the Dynamics 365 application. So while they're using the application, if they are on a lead screen and if they need to understand, okay, what is the next step, or what else should I do, or how can I let's say qualify this to an opportunity. So all of those things can be a part of learning path, which provides them contextual help where you can have bubbles and click through experiences, and also embedded videos and text that can provide them all the guidance within context, based on the security role that they have, based on which area of the application they are in. They can get the relevant training and help content. So explore these solutions and to really guide your users through navigating this application and entering the information that they have to in a smooth and a simple manner. And I think one of the features that we have related to the app modules, the ability to create an app module and design an experience that's around what the user needs in the application, because you might have the same instance that's used by different user groups, and in the navigation you might see more entities than what you would ever use, so which can actually confuse the user sometimes, because they might not have access to those entities, or the sitemap may not accurately reflect exactly the things or the processes that a specific user needs to perform. So using the app module designer can really fix that and help your user focus on the area of the application that's important to them, and only focus on the processes and entities that they need to use and they have access to. That's just another recommendation in terms of improving the overall experience around navigating and using Dynamics 365. The other aspect is to understand how users actually are interacting. If in a scenario where a lot of these cases come in as emails, and you see your end users are doing a lot of interaction with their customers on Outlook, does it make sense to have an Outlook integration? So we might have some the app for Outlook tools and even the Outlook client to be able to establish this kind of integration to track the communication that your end users might have within Dynamics. So it's important to understand which is the primary system, where their data resides. Is all the information in emails? Then it might be relevant to set up these integrations to help them. Similarly, mobile and offline capabilities. So it's important to understand, are your users always sitting in an office where they have good connectivity and they're sitting on a big screen, or are they going to be mobile, meeting clients and maybe traveling to locations where the network might not be as reliable? So things like offline mode and the app for Dynamics 365 can be relevant, and it might be helpful to roll these capabilities out to your end users if it helps them adopt the solution. And I think the last point is related to accessibility here, and it's one of the key focus areas for us internally as Microsoft and as the Dynamics team as well. And if you have, it's important to understand for your user base what are the specific accessibility requirements. Some of these might be fulfilled through maybe third-party tools or browser-based plugins or add-ins that you might have. But again, that's it's a very important aspect of deploying a Dynamics 365 solution, to understand the accessibility requirements and then bring in the right kind of tools and support to help the users who might have special needs. We have an accessibility site dedicated for Dynamics 365. So if you have any questions around, please go take a look at that. And if you have feedback and you want to talk to someone within the product team to understand, or to understand how you can achieve your accessibility requirements, feel free to talk to your FastTrack program managers, and we can certainly connect you with the right people to assist. So I think this covers the usability aspect, whether it's from the comfort around the navigating the application, and designing for the end user, designing a system that's end user centric, and also around meeting the other expectations that our users might have when they're using Dynamics, depending on how they use and what they do. So that's to do with the usability aspect of it. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat window, and I'll be happy to answer them. Or if you want to hold them off till the end, then yeah, we do have some time for Q&A, so you can ask your questions and share your experiences if you have any. So the next one is reliability and performance, and I think this is one of the most important, because the perception about, no matter how good the data is, how good the system is, or how good it looks, your user interface, if it doesn't perform, then it's not going to be used. Users tend to get disconnected and they don't come back to the system very easily. So it's very important that we look at the performance not at a later stage where you have gone live, the system is slow, and then we come back and come up with a performance optimization strategy to fix those performance issues, but focus on the performance from the onset. There are a lot of things within the application, because based on the experience or the performance issues that we have seen, maybe the way the implementation was done, or maybe the network is set up, there are a lot of things that can be done beforehand, even before you go live, to optimize and be ready to deliver that great experience for users in the first go, with your first release on the first day. You need not go back to the users with a system that's slow and then come back and fix these issues and later roll it out, because the damage is already done. Important to focus on the performance and reliability from the starting itself. So, and these things can be easily measured, like the form load times, the time to save a record, or if you're trying to do a search, how long it's taking. And typically, it's really good to run some of these tests after you have done your data migrations, maybe on your UAT or training environments, where there's some sufficient data which is realistic to your real scenarios, to be able to get some of these metrics and benchmark the performance of your solution beforehand. And if you're seeing any issues there, you can start working on those, and you can even discuss that with us, so we can provide our recommendations to improve the experience and the performance of a solution. The way the system has been customized, so maybe some of the integrations or some of the scripts that might have been written might render the UI unresponsive sometimes, based on maybe a synchronous call that was made that is not returning, or that's taking some time to return. It can freeze the application. So it's very important that we're aware of any such code or customizations that can freeze the user interface and really slow down the experience. And these need to be tested and verified beforehand. So that's to do with the, I think responsiveness is a big aspect, and that's the part of performance that really impacts the end users. I mean, if you have a batch process that's running a bit slower, that should still be fine, but the end user application, the responsiveness that you have there is extremely critical. The next one is more around awareness. So because you're operating on a cloud service, you will see that there might be situations where there are maintenance windows, there are outages or issues where your users may not be able to access the application or parts of the application, which need to be clearly communicated, and you should have a clear channel established with your end users to notify them about the changes that are coming, about the issues that are going on, and if there are any other things that they should be aware of, and giving them information beforehand, and keeping them notified rather than they having to open the system and run into an issue and go back to a help desk. I think it makes a significant difference. So proactive communications around the service and the known issues that you might have with the solutions. Maybe you might have some bugs or some areas of the application that are not working. Notify that to your users beforehand. You might be able to use something like a newsletter or even regular email notifications, which will keep them up to date on what's happening, and if there's an issue, it will be resolved by when. Extremely important, and this is a process that you have to define internally within your organization. From a Dynamics perspective, you will see that on the message center we post a lot of updates about our service, the service health, etc. And this information needs to get plugged into your internal comms channel that you have with your end users, so that they are getting this information in a timely fashion, and it's not just in the message center with only a few admins being able to look at it and maybe not pass it on to your end users. So define that process, which will significantly improve the trust that the end users have in the system, and overall their confidence level. The next one is robustness of the solution. Many a times, we see that there are a lot of integrations that that the customer might do with their line of business applications. Some of them in cloud, some of them on premises. So it's important that these integrations are built in a way so that they are robust. There should be retry mechanisms built into them. What if there is an outage on maybe another service? Let's say there is a dependency on one of the Azure components, and if Azure is having a maintenance or an outage, how that is going to impact your end user experience on Dynamics. So it's very important to think about these integrations and what's the impact that it's going to have on Dynamics. And we should make sure that we are giving the appropriate error messages and guidance so that users are aware where the issue is, and if something is failing within Dynamics because a system that is on-prem is not working, it's still going to be a perception that this specific form, lead form, is not working, because something else is failing elsewhere. So it's very important to notify to the user if there's an issue going on in a different system, and what is the impact that they're going to have on Dynamics of that. This extremely, I can't stress much on it, but I've seen a lot of integration scenarios where there are no retry mechanisms. When one of the integrated application goes down, there is no clear plan. How are we going to manage that integration in the meantime? There's no clear reconciliation mechanism, and it's just that it all goes down to delivering a bad experience for the end user. So be very careful with the integrations and make sure these are included in your integration plan. And you define all the what if scenarios: if this is down, if that's down, if this link is broken, and you have clear ways to mitigate those and notify your users. The last one, I think I already touched upon this, is the errors and failures. So wherever possible, give clear error messages to the users, and if possible, the next best action of what they can do. Many times, you might be able to resolve an issue by clearing the browser cache, and there's no need for the user to go to the help desk and spend time before they can get to know that. So if there are a few issues like this, which are known issues, then publish that these are the actions that you can try on your own to resolve the issue for itself. That's again very important. Try to give them a recommendation of the next best action wherever possible. So that's overall, when you're designing for reliability and performance, what are the key things that you should be aware of, which otherwise can impact the adoption of the solution. And I think the last key area that we have on the adoption guidance is the key factors for enabling adoption itself. Having a clear motivation and a reward system. What should be the communication strategy and executive messaging strategy, and also training and support. So starting off with the motivation and reward system, I think we spoke about this a little bit during the business value, that users should be clearly aware of what the value the new system brings to the organization, but it's also important to make the value very clear what value it brings to the end user. Maybe the improved performance, or better integrations with the line of business applications. Whatever those key aspects of the solution are that will help them adopt and feel motivated to use this, need to be communicated. So create that value statement for your end users, and use that in your messaging so that they're aware of why they should be using. And we spoke a little bit about the adoption goals and setting the expectations. So set the adoption goals based on what your key business KPIs are. And once you've set the adoption goals, these need to be communicated to each stakeholder group regularly, and then you need to follow up on these, through the operational management, etc. So it's extremely important that you set the adoption goals and not just build a system and ask them to start using it. The next one is, many a times it's hard to create a intrinsic motivator, maybe like a compensation or an award for using the system. So you can also rely on some extrinsic motivation solutions like gamification, where you can create virtual games and a reward system that can help them use the system. So that's another area where we can talk about. So we have a tech talk on Dynamics gamification solutions. So if that's something that you want to explore, you're interested in, we can certainly talk about that. And I think it's also important to make the users feel that they're connected, right? So engaging the users early on maybe during the initial solution design, maybe involve them or conduct these sessions for early feedback and inputs as a part of your sprint demos, or you can do let's say a monthly session by inviting key users from the from the community and show them the solution, what you have built till now, get their feedback. That just makes them feel overall very much connected with your program and the project, which can have a significant impact on how they adopt once the system is rolled out. And in fact, how they perceive and how they share this with their peers will also be very, very important. So find ways to involve them early on, which is extremely important. The communications and executive messaging, I think this is another area where the impact of the system, what is the impact that it has on business, what are the KPIs and how important it is to your organization, needs to come from your executives and program sponsors. Identify your BDMs or people within your leadership who can actually go and communicate these to your end users, maybe during your town halls or through the internal comms channels, newsletters, etc., whatever you might have. So this regular executive messaging, highlighting the importance of what the new system delivers and why it is important to the business and to the end users is extremely important. This communication needs to be, you need to define a regular cadence for these communications, have a clear template, and make sure that users are frequently seeing this, maybe within their emails and at various organizational events that you might have. Extremely important to set the right tone within the user community and also get them excited about it. The last area that I want to talk within the adoption enablement is training. Well, certainly I've seen that most customers do have a training plan, immediately after go live, and maybe a regular training plan every 3 months in different locations. What's important is have an effective user training strategy, but also try to use the latest tools like learning paths and other self-serve capabilities, so that the user doesn't have to wait for a 3-day classroom training to really get to know how to use the applications. Because the frequency at which you're going to change the application, the frequency at which the updates come out, this may not be sustainable, right? So, and especially if your users are in different locations across different countries, so have an effective user training plan and see how it can be delivered best in a most contextual fashion for your end users. Have a community of early adopters and super users. And when we say super users, what we really mean is, pick up people from your user communities whom you would identify as influencers, and they are the right people to get involved in the cycle early on, and make them evangelists of your program and your solutions, so that they can influence the community to positively adopt your system. That's again should be a part of your change management and adoption strategy. And operationally, have an internal help desk that's well versed with Dynamics, and it's not just the product, but who has a good understanding of the solution and the customizations that were done by a partner, and who understands the processes very well. So this internal help desk should be able to quickly address maybe simpler issues which are not major code changes or bug fixes, but someone with an expertise who can quickly help the user unblock them and get them moving. And it's very important that you have the right kind of knowledge transfer from your partners who build the solution, and this team should be well versed with the product, a lot of aspects of Dynamics, and they should be up to date and also understand the solution and the customizations. And there has to be clear support strategy, even the post go live, that if you have code related issues or something that your internal help desk at a level 1 can't handle, then what's the strategy to go further, right? So have a clear support plan post go live, because don't have a solution that was built but you don't know what plugin was written, where the code is, and if you need to make a change, you don't know where to go. That's not in a good spot. That puts you actually in a very difficult spot, and I've seen that a few times in my career. So make sure that you have a plan to handle those. So with that, I think we've come to the end of the adoption guidance module, where we spoke about the 5 key areas and the key adoption barriers that we have seen, and what you can be doing to overcome these and not run into this with your Dynamics 365 program. The next one to talk about is the ability to measure. Like I mentioned, it's very important that after you've executed your adoption plan, you need a way to measure how it's going. What is it that the users are using? Who are the users who are using it, right? So from that perspective, I think a good starting point would be to use the org insight solution. So this is something that's available through the app source. So you can just go and straight away install this on your production instance, which will give you a fairly good idea. Now, there are a few things that are technical on this. What are the plugins, jobs, etc. But I think if we just look at the active usage area, this can give a pretty good idea of how many people are actually using it. Which are the entities that are being most used? Where are the maximum read operations happening? Where are the most of the write operations happening? You can also export this data in Excel. You can do interesting reporting with it. So it's important that as a starting point, you start looking at this tool to see how the system is being used, what is being used, and who are the people who are using it. And based on this, you can refine your adoption strategy. And again, because this is a generic solution that anybody can install and see, it may not give a clear view of which processes or what specific areas of your application you might have to build your own custom reporting, but at a high level, this can still give a very good idea of what are the entities being used, and you should be able to guess which areas of application or which processes are well adopted based on this. So again, would highly recommend you to install this on your production systems and start measuring the adoption and usage of your solution. If you need any help with this or any more guidance installing this, you can always contact your FastTrack program managers, and they can help you out. And a lot of this data is coming from our telemetry systems, so you'll find it extremely valuable. And there are some other aspects, in terms of plugin failures, how you're using the storage, etc., which might be more interesting for the technical folks, but it's certainly useful. So with that, we just come to this slide where I just want to summarize in terms of what you can do, where you can go and get the guidance, so some of the barriers and the issues that we have discussed. I want to talk about some of the FastTrack services and workshops that can help you address some of the challenges that you might run into, and also the other areas that you can discuss with your program managers and get additional guidance on. So whether you want to discuss about the success KPIs, or you want to define what your roadmap should be, maybe phase 1, phase 2, and how you should be looking at dynamics strategically. There are a few sessions that we can do for you. We can also do a product roadmap session, so you can see how well your strategies align to the product roadmap. And also, if you're trying to design a business process workflow and you're finding it challenging, to how should I do the navigation, or how should I transition? If you have those questions, feel free to bring those to us, and we can define we can certainly work with your partner in kind of streamlining that experience for you. From a data and functionality perspective, also, it's whether we have some services on data migration that can certainly help you. We have some sessions on security modeling, so meeting those privacy and collaboration requirements. And if you're running into a situation where how do I know who can see what, or how do I make sure that they are able to collaborate with with these resources, bring those to us if you have any questions, any specific questions on the design there. So like I mentioned, design business processes, and if you want to understand a little bit more about how to surface the data on Power BI, how that integration works, etc., you can certainly talk to us. Learning paths, we can do a session on that, and we can show you what it has to offer. Productivity and collaboration. What are the other office tools, or office productivity areas that Dynamics can collaborate with to help your users. And even areas like form and process design, or maybe if you want to look at optimizing the performance of a specific process or a form, you can certainly bring those to us. We have a set of FastTrack services and areas that we can provide you guidance on. So if you see that you need additional help, feel free to bring those to us, and we are here to help you through these services and additional content to provide you guidance as necessary. So that's helping you with your adoption goals and capabilities that are there. And now I just want to touch upon a little bit on the resources that are out there that you can right away go and start using. So if you can look at our training and adoption kit. This provides you a set of user guides for different versions of Dynamics. So if you want to know how do I go to the mobile app and add an activity, then you can access our adoption and training kit, which gives you a good template to build on top of, to also train your users. So certainly you'll find this helpful. For the accessibility requirements, you can certainly visit the Dynamics 365 Accessibility Center, where we talk about what are the accessibility features we support. And if you have further questions, feel free to talk to us about this. We also have the Dynamics 365 roadmap site, which you'll find interesting, with all the capabilities that we plan to roll out in our next release. What's being developed, what was released, what's in preview, etc. So all of that information can be accessed from here. So with that, I think we've come to the end of the content, and we didn't have a lot of questions, but again, if you have questions, feel free to ask. Feel free to ask me if you have any further inputs, or you need a specific dedicated session on this. Talk to your program managers and send them the follow-up questions if you don't want to bring those up here. But yeah, we are happy to help you in this area and make sure that you build something that's adoption ready and your end users are happy using it. So with that, I'm just gonna pass it on to Michelle. Just to make sure that the polls are open so that you can provide your feedback and inputs on this session, and again, ask any questions.
Thank you, Alok. Attendees wanted to let you know that I have put a link in the messages section on your screen If you've enjoyed today's web conference or have feedback on how we can provide you with a better event, please let us know by completing this survey. You just click on the messages button to find that link to the survey, and the survey is on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest possible score. We've hoped that you found today's information helpful. And Alok, I'll turn it back to you for any final thoughts or if any questions come in at this time.
Yeah, sure. So again, let us know if you have questions, and thanks for joining this, and we're very happy to do this session, because really our goal is to certainly provide you all the onboarding guidance when you're deploying your Dynamics 365, but our focus is also for you to be able to build something that that your users are happy using, like I mentioned, because for us the end user satisfaction is also key, and making sure that your users are satisfied is of prime importance. So again, if you have any questions or need guidance on that, always reach out to your FastTrack program managers, or if you have questions, you can ask now. I think I can stay on for a minute or so, or a little more if you want. If you have more questions, if not, then we can close it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alok. Just so you know, the recording will be available at the same registration site within 24 hours. And I'd like to extend a big thank you again to Alok, and thank you, audience, for logging in and joining us today. This concludes today's web conference. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.